introduce myself on the last panel. My name is Bret Worley. I'm CEO and founder of MC Nutraceuticals. I'm also a board member of the American Healthy Alternatives Association and also president of Colorado Healthy Alternatives Association. I will be your moderator again for the second panel, and I will now introduce JD McCormick, who has essentially put this all together with the help of Leo, who was on our last panel, and the founder, president, executive director of American Healthy.
Sacrificed a lot of, mic on. Mic check.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm the guy that sacrificed all the blood, sweat, and tears, my left leg, left arm to build the association. But honestly, I did all this on behalf of the industry, on behalf of all of you. I have retail stores, I had a small wholesale company, but I'm here to free the plant and make sure moving forward that the industry doesn't just get gobbled up by monopolies. I think what we've seen across the country is just a terrible example of what we call kind of crony capitalism. So just fighting for the little guys is my passion in this process. So I'm going to introduce Philip Snow. He's our Legislative Affairs Director for American Healthy Alternatives, and have him say a few words.
It's a pretty esteemed company all across this panel. My name is Philip Snow. I'm just here so I don't get fined. But I'm really just kidding. No, I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for American Healthy Alternatives. As Bret mentioned, I've served as General Counsel for MC Nutraceuticals. I've been practicing cannabis law since 2011. Also worked for Kite Law Office, which is based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And really excited to be here. I think everybody that is on the stage here has a pretty unique perspective on how policy has helped inform their business practices, where they choose to operate, how they choose to operate, and a lot of people up here, certainly including the leader, have made impactful changes on the direction that this industry is taking. So I'm honored to be up here. Thanks for having me.
Leader.
Thank y'all. It's just John. I don't think all of the titles.
I feel really cool when I say leader, I'm not gonna lie.
Well, first of all, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I have a unique perspective because I'm actually here as an exhibitor on the floor, president of the CBD and hemp manufacturing company, but also in my spare time, I ran for office and messed up and won. That's a joke. I got elected to State House in North Carolina in 2012. And in 2000, I started my career in the legislature in 2013. And then in 2016, I became the House Majority Leader and have served in that capacity since then. So I'm actually the longest serving Majority Leader in state history. And I never thought, one, I'd be here. But God has plans for you that you don't see. And I found myself front and center and advocating for hemp and CBD policies and cannabis policies in the state of North Carolina. And actually not only enjoying it, but having a really good time doing it.
Awesome.
Hey.
Hi everybody. Wow. My name is Nicholas Patrick. I'm the owner of Embrace CBD Wellness Centers, MFP Marketing Solutions, and I'm also the state chapter president of the Maryland Healthy Alternatives Association. My role right now is trying to make sure we win the PR battle. Really trying to get people to see the bigger picture of what's going on with hemp across the country. I think one of the biggest problems we're facing as an industry is most people just don't know what's happening. Most people don't know that there's a delineation between cannabis and hemp. There's a free market here, and that there's a lot of businesses that are relying on this industry, a lot of jobs, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs that are being supported by the industry. And so I made a film that some of you watched. There's a lot more coming in that regard to try to win the PR battle here, guys. So that's me. Thanks for having me on the panel.
So a unique start. I mean, the PR battle is one of the biggest battles. There's money, there's PR, and there's lobbyists. How have we all fought the PR battle? I think everyone on stage kind of knows me a little bit. Mine's just a brute force tactic, but some people are a little bit more graceful. So Nick, you put together this beautiful documentary. I think part 2 is coming out next week, or
at the end of the month, we're doing a red carpet premiere for it in Baltimore City. Any of you that are in Maryland and want to come to Baltimore.
So from your perspective, Nick, I mean, how have you dealt with the, let's call it propaganda from the marijuana side, and let's just assume that it's from the marijuana side. How do you deal with it, gracefully, ungracefully? What has been your tactic so far?
I think in the beginning of all of this, and that's a great question, The beginning of all this, we were very diplomatic, right? Because we're dealing with state legislatures, we're dealing with lobbyists that are extraordinarily high paid, we're dealing with the cannabis industry who is very well organized. So you have to come to the table initially and try to be diplomatic and try to be peaceful. And then eventually, you know, we did the diplomatic thing for 2 years, and then a bill passed that crushed the industry. I had 3 brick and mortar retail stores that as of July 1st of last year, I had to close all 3 of them. I started my company with my wife with $8,000. How many people can say that in the cannabis industry? Right? It's so incredibly expensive to get into that industry. Hemp is the cannabis industry for the rest of us, right? And so we were really diplomatic. We worked with the legislature. We did everything the right way. We hired the lobbyists. We wore our suits and ties, and we were very kind. But then they crushed us anyway. And then I made a movie, and we called it out. So to answer your question, we call it out. We show the people exactly how much money is being spent by cannabis companies, money funneling into General Assemblies, particularly in Maryland, and we put it out there for everybody to see. Part of the campaign we're doing in Maryland is calling out specific companies in an attempt to get the public in Maryland to see that these companies aren't working for their benefit. When the cannabis industry, when dispensaries start looking like the Apple Store, you're losing a lot of cannabis culture. And I think that once people realize that, and that there is people that are fighting for cannabis culture, they tend to want to support you and rally behind you. And so that's one of the main things that we're doing here is calling it out, letting people know that it's mostly misinformation by competitors who just want to monopolize the market and stifle small businesses.
Jay, you want to pile on there?
So I'm the diplomatic guy on the PR side. You know, it's my opinion, I think, the rules of this legislative game in the United States were set up 250 years ago. We're not going to break the system. We're not going to break the rules of the game. We want to stay legal. We want to do everything above board. We have to be as diplomatic as possible and play inside the same set of rules that everyone else is. The issue is when large corporations steamroll the little guys for their own net profits and maybe a couple extra zeros on their bank account, that's where you have to take the gloves off, right? I think being diplomatic and working through the issues with legislators, lobbyists, think tanks, professionals and attorneys and people that really understand the legislative process, it's important to be as professional as humanly possible and work through the system, you know, properly. But if you lose everything, you're in desperation mode, it's time to take the gloves off. And I think that's kind of where some of these states are going. If we continue to lose states and we don't organize this industry well enough, we're going to be in desperation mode. And so I hope not to see too much, you know, negative PR, but I think moving forward, the more organized we are, and as this room gets more and more full over the next you know, several months, I think we've got a real opportunity to produce great PR that, you know, shows the small business aspect, shows the American spirit, shows how this industry can be run professionally and run by small businesses.
I think a state that is run very well is North Carolina. I think, Philip, you'll be going there tomorrow. I'm guessing Leader Bell, you'll be back there tomorrow. Is that where we're headed?
I'm here.
Oh. Well, Philip will be there tomorrow. Philip, why are you in North Carolina tomorrow, and what will you be doing?
I'll be in North Carolina tomorrow, speaking on a panel that's being held for the Greater Carolina Policy Symposium, and this is a specific panel regarding cannabis regulation within the state of North Carolina. And by cannabis, I mean the botanical term. You know, on one side of the fence we have marijuana, which exceeds 0.3% delta-9 THC by dry weight. On the other side, well, again, it's the Schedule I controlled substance. On the other side, we have hemp. And there's some, you know, historically, states in the Southeast have struggled with passing regulations regarding the devil's lettuce. Nobody really wants to talk about marijuana in the South. And quite frankly, hemp has, flourished within the Southeast and within a lot of these states where medical programs were either highly restrictive, were unable to get off the ground, or were, in some instances, capitalized on by people with strong political ties that were very helpful in writing the laws that allowed them to exist in the first place. So my purpose in visiting Raleigh tomorrow, in addition to speaking with legislators about House Bill 563, which passed through North Carolina's House last year with unanimous support and is working its way through the Senate right now, and what I hope will become kind of a model piece of legislation governing hemp and hemp-derived products across the country once all is said and done, is talking about regulating medical marijuana within the state. There are some within the state legislature that have grand aspirations to completely sidestep that and just move straight into adult use or recreational, some people like to refer to it. Again, I've been in this industry since 2011. I got my start in Denver writing medical marijuana regulations, wrote the constitutional amendment for recreational marijuana in Colorado in 2012. Practiced marijuana law until 2019 when I moved to the Southeast and I pivoted into hemp and CBD, quite frankly, due to that political culture, due to that impact of policy in state politics in the Southeast. And so tomorrow in Raleigh, I will be talking about the regulations surrounding hemp, but more importantly, as I recently heard, I would much rather walk to the right idea than run to the wrong one. And I think that that can be a useful example of the way that state policy can help us get to the right solution, rather than catering to monopolistic ventures that are just trying to pad their pockets, as JD mentioned earlier. John and I were talking prior to this panel about how long it takes to write good legislation. This is not just a function of people sitting in a room for, this isn't the Jeff Bezos 2 pizza rule. This is something that takes place over extended periods of time through revision and taking into account various interest groups and speaking with people about what they would really like to have in legislation. And, by no means is any bill ever perfect. 1,000% I would agree with that. But what I would say is, if you start listening to the stakeholders, truly balancing, in this industry, consumer safety with market demand, realizing that regulation rather than prohibition is a far more effective strategy in dealing with this. I think that that's going to lead and lend itself to the best possible outcome for all industry participants, because I think everybody in this room here today is interested in the policy that is, guiding their businesses. You guys aren't just in it to make a quick buck and get out of here. Clearly, if you're nerdy enough, like myself, to care about policy, then you want to be here for a while. So I think it's important that we get it right rather than just kind of force something through.
And Philip, how is that being received? Let's just say specifically in North Carolina. I wish we had time to talk about all the 50 states of America, but when you go in, how is it received given that it's hemp and not devil's lettuce? And John, please speak up when
I was going to
comfortable too, or JD.
I think that might be a better question for John.
Well, so when you look at North Carolina, one, we're one of the fastest growing states in the country. We're extremely popular right now. We have a continuously rated for the #1 place in the country to do business. A lot of good things happening in North Carolina. The downside is that we have zero CBD and hemp laws and regulations in the state, so it is honestly the wild, wild west. I'm very blessed to work with an entity that's put millions of dollars into a facility to do it the right way, and yet our retail product and the folks that we make products for are competing for the same shelf space as a guy that's making it in his backyard in a barn in an unsanitary environment, and frankly, he doesn't know what's in the product he's putting on the shelf. And that scares the crap out of me as a consumer. It's just scary you. And from a legislative perspective, it then becomes my job to find a solution to the problem. And if you run in there and just try to say this is the way it is, I don't care what the issue is, you're going to meet resistance. But you walk in, understand the issue, start looking for friends within the issue. Also look at your opposition and find out what their opposition is, and how can we come together to put a piece of legislation in place that does the goal that everybody wants. In North Carolina, we're going to put forth a piece of legislation that has minimum standards across the board, that has safety and compliance, that has quality, and we're going to have a very healthy and viable market when we're done. And that's what we all want in our state. And so if we do it right, this is a process. Nothing's easy. I'm still working on pieces of legislation that we launched in 2013 and 14, because things change. People change, the industry changes, technology changes. And so this will be an issue that, if we lay the groundwork for it, we can tweak over time to make sure that we're keeping up with technology and compliance. And we don't know what's going to come out tomorrow. It could be something completely different than what we're seeing today. And so we've got to be able to move and adapt to that. And that's what we try to do in North Carolina.
right, switching gears a little bit, Farm Bill. We already kind of got the question asked a little bit, but Jay, do you want to kick off the Farm Bill? First, let me ask you a better question. What does American Healthy Alternatives Association do at the Capitol, given that it's a federal association? What is the primary objectives in DC?
So, unlike state legislatures, and I got to say, Congress is like sprinting in molasses. It is slow. I heard a quote, and I'll impart this on everyone here. The state legislature and state laws show up on your quarterly and annual, profits, right? Your quarterly and annual reports. Things that happen in Congress are how you can forecast your business for the next 5-10 years, right? And if you look at it through that lens, we've been working in DC now for over a year, and I don't know that we've made any real substantial changes beyond, hundreds.
Running in molasses.
Yeah, running
like
in molasses.
that.
I mean, we've taken, I don't know, hundreds of meetings at this point. Our lobby teams there, really work very hard. But I think the reality of Congress and my personal opinion is Congress does its best work when it does nothing, right? I think that honestly, the less they do, the better for our industry. But to everyone's point up here and even the last panel, you got to have a bare minimum of standards. Things like national testing standards, national marketing restrictions, child-proof packaging, some of those kind of overarching narratives that the federal government could do very effectively and set the groundwork and set the standards and let the states and the laboratories of democracy take it from there, I think is what I would call, the best solution here. When we're in DC, we take a lot of meetings that involve what I would call kind of like think tanks. We sit down and some of the best minds in this industry, we go back and forth on ideas and we debate different topics and how to get through the best, course of action with the FDA, the USDA, the DEA, the CDC, ASTM, NIST, all these different organizations, and we've got entire flow charts of how any potential regulation could work and could affect the industry. But at the end of the day, Congress, the United States government, is the world's largest superpower. How do you negotiate a small sliver of the gross domestic product for the world's largest superpower at scale? It's very difficult. It takes a lot of time and effort, and honestly, it takes a lot of money. And I think it's not easy for any one of us up here to forecast out what the Farm Bill is going to be like in 6 months. But just looking at what we've seen over the last 6 months, we can kind of project what might happen in the first version of the Farm Bill. But then once it gets to committee, there's going to be a ton of potential amendments. When it gets to the floor, there's going to be potential amendments. The Farm Bill, and I'd like to hear from Philip on this, the Farm Bill governs many number of things, right? Agriculture is if not the largest, maybe the second largest industry in the United States, and the Farm Bill does so much more than just hemp. I think there might be a common misconception that the Farm Bill, although it means everything to us, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages and covers so many different issues. We are a small, one-paragraph subsection in that bill. Our entire multi-billion-dollar industry is based around approximately 4 sentences. So, Philip, from your perspective, have we been effective in DC?
It's something of a loaded question, but
You still want to have a job after this panel?
I can neither confirm nor deny that. What I would say is, if you think about erosion, right? It takes they say that it's a water drop that can eventually wear a hole through a stone. Working with Congress on, over 1,000 pages of legislation that govern, agricultural issues, that cover SNAP, that cover EBT, that govern so many different things, and we're 5 pages of it. Working with them on getting that changed, it's an uphill fight. And, I would kind of equate it to, Sisyphus, the guy that's always pushing the boulder up the hill, only for it to fall down the other side. Sometimes it feels like that. But I do think that meaningful conversations have been had with representatives, with senators that actually care about this issue, that come from states that have robust hemp farming practices, products manufacturing industries, things like that, that truly do want to pay attention to the issue, that do want to make sure that, those 5 pages, that they absolutely get it right, whether that be in a minute change or, in a complete reauthorization of what we saw in the 2018 Farm Bill. I mean, we've seen, some reasonable estimates indicate between a 28 and a $36 billion consumer market build up on one definition. I mean, everybody in this room, or most of the people that are on the floor of this exhibition hall base their entire livelihood on one definition, 0.3% delta-9 THC on a dry weight basis, which, includes the plant, parts of the plant, seeds, extracts, derivatives, cannabinoids, isomers, salts of isomers, and again, the easiest ask that we have in meetings with legislators on Capitol Hill in DC is to leave that definition alone. Let us continue to do what we've been doing. Are we sick and tired of seeing the FDA kick the can down the road on CBD, on, other regulations that could certainly help our industry 1,000%. But instead of poking that bear and trading the devil we do know, which is, relative regulatory ambiguity, we might get the devil that we don't know. And I think that that's what's interesting about, a lot of the buzz that people are talking about with this idea of rescheduling marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Well, based on recent, press releases, it seems as if that decision's already been made without going through rulemaking, without going through all the attenuating processes of making such a drastic shift. And then those products would still be regulated by the FDA. And last time I checked, big marijuana doesn't really want that. So, that isn't exactly the boon to the marijuana industry that everybody might be telling you it is. And I don't really need to put a tinfoil hat or a conspiracy theory hat on to tell you that. But, I think that in meetings on the Hill, progress is being made. Conversations are being had where people are being listened to. Now, on the flip side of that, big marijuana is on the Hill in DC. They are having similar conversations about an unregulated industry, an industry that is built up around a loophole, an industry that doesn't care about consumer safety, gas station heroin, things like that. Well, last time I checked, and I'm not an expert in this, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. This industry is begging for regulations, or at least some form of federal guidance, and I think that when I speak with legislators on the Hill in DC, I say, look, there are certain regulations that everybody can get behind, and whether you want to use North Carolina as a model bill, personally, I think you should, but whether you want to use that as at least a template or a jumping off point, there are a lot of regulations that everybody in this industry would be for if it provided them that regulatory certainty for longevity, for existence. And realistically speaking, that's the fight that everybody is up against. If you don't fight for it, one of the lobbyists I work with in the state of Colorado says if you're not driving the bus, you will get run over by it. And sitting on the sidelines, waiting for things to happen, as I practice law and I advise clients all over the country and all over the nation, all over the world regarding hemp and hemp-derived products. And it used to be Ohio turned off Delta 8, or this state banned that, or whatever the case is, and it was so reactive. There was no active participation or no proactive approaches to this, and I think that that's why policy is so important, because people need to start having these conversations rather than just waiting for the results. And so I think that ultimately we sit, as a former South Carolina Attorney General said, we sit at the unique intersection of politics, policy, and law. And he talked about that as a position of being an Attorney General, but I think that's exactly where the hemp industry is right now, because there are a lot of politics in it. There are a lot of policy decisions. And certainly there are laws. We're seeing a regulatory patchwork that is coming up in different states around the country. as a result of lack of federal guidance or federal policy or whatever you want to call it. So, I think ultimately we are effective on the Hill in DC. Sometimes it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but I think things are trending in the right direction. More specifically for the Farm Bill, and then long term for the raging battle between the two unique forms of cannabis. So it's a fun time to be alive. Ask me tomorrow, and I might have less hair, but it's a lot of fun. So I think we are effective in DC, and that was certainly a long-winded way to answer that question.
Yeah, it was pretty long, I'm not gonna lie, but we are effective, I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I think the last thing I have a question for is we talked about good policy. We talked about feeling fairly good about the Farm Bill, including the question from the last panel is, and I think Nick, you're uniquely situated to answer this question. I think we all can answer it. But what does bad policy do? I mean, we talk about the ramifications of what policy means and what good policy means, but we've seen very bad policy. I live in the state of Colorado. I can't sell anything in a retail establishment, yet I have to adhere to the strictest manufacturing guidelines in the country, and I can export it to legal states. So I kind of know a little bit about it, but Nick, what are your thoughts on what bad policy did? And obviously you reacted, and you got a short to medium term win out of it, but what did it do whenever the bad policy came out?
It sucked. To be honest, it started off in Maryland. I'm going to speak for Maryland. In 2021, our legislative session runs from January through the middle of April. Thank God we live in a state with a part-time legislature, or this would be too much work for the small group that we have in Maryland. But in 2020, end of 2021, we caught the tail end of a newsletter from a senator talking about this little-known public health crisis, which in and of itself sounds to me like an oxymoron. How do you have a little-known public health crisis? Either it's a public health crisis or it's not. If it's a public health crisis, it's likely not little-known. But anyways, they tried to put in a bill that would have banned all Delta-8 and intoxicating hemp compounds. They didn't realize there was a big industry. We pushed back on them and got it converted to a study. That was good. That was good. That was like a show of good faith, right? That they were willing to work with us. Little did we know that the behind closed doors, the study group was put together with just 2 members of the hemp industry, a whole bunch of big cannabis people, particularly the Maryland Wholesale Cannabis Trade Association, which is led by the largest cannabis operators in Maryland, as well as multiple multi-state operators. And they ran the entire meeting, they ran the entire agenda, and then they gave recommendations to the General Assembly, which we in large part agreed with. We agreed with packaging requirements, labeling requirements, testing standards, age gating. I mean, who doesn't agree with that? Show of hands, anybody not agree that we should, right? These are all common sense things. And so we had expected in the legislative session of 2023 that we were going to be on offense. We had a bipartisan bill. We had a Republican and a Democrat as sponsors of our bill that we wrote, which put to me, in my view, and I know I'm a little bit biased, but I think was probably one of the best hemp bills ever written. It created a hemp advisory council to work alongside the Department of Agriculture to inform hemp policy, and there was so much involved in it, and they didn't even let it go to a second reading. Instead, they dropped the Cannabis Reform Act on us when the bad policy, to answer your question, Bret, was 0.5 milligram per serving, 2.5 milligrams per package, done deal. That was like, even full spectrum CBD was gone. Like, it was a really, really bad look. And to answer your question of what it did, is the Maryland hemp industry supports 4,200 jobs. $170 million in wages, close to $400 million in retail sales that have been tracked without including C-stores and gas stations. So it's incredibly harmful, it's detrimental to the industry when bad policy gets through. And bad policy gets through when nobody's standing up, or when the people are standing up don't have enough money, or there's not enough. Right? We need that's why I'm glad we have events like this where we can get people more involved and more activated. I mean, Philip said, if you were a nerd enough to sit through an event like this, that means that you're actively engaged and you want to be more involved. And we need more people like that to stop bad policy. How many of your businesses will be destroyed by 0.5 milligram serving? Like, everybody, right? It's a reality, because when one state goes bad, that's a dangerous precedent. that they can then copy and paste in every other state. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing the same language that we saw in Maryland is very similar language in Florida, very similar language in Virginia, very similar language here, there, and everywhere. And anytime they get a win, it makes it more difficult for us to get good policy passed. So it's important that we stand up to bad policy. And to tell you the truth, as an advocate, which I cut my teeth in this a couple of years ago. I was just a guy in my store selling my stuff. I never even planned on getting involved in any of this until my livelihood was getting ready to be stripped from me. And the weight of, and I'm sure, I can only imagine, I talk to JD a lot. I've not monopolized his time quite a bit. I see him as very much like my political mentor. But I can only imagine the weight of what it must feel like for some of the top leaders that are overseeing this for the entire industry, how many people's livelihoods and families are dependent upon this, and what that must feel like. I know in Maryland it was extraordinarily difficult to carry that weight and have the phone calls coming in like, are we gonna be okay? So that's a tough phone call to answer, and to have to tell somebody like, I don't know if we're gonna be okay. I don't know if you're gonna be able to pay your mortgage, if you're gonna lose your house, if you're gonna not be able to put your kids through school. These are all things that matter to people. These are real people. This is a real industry made up of small business owners, many of us that started with table scraps to build a company. And so when bad policy gets passed, families get destroyed, businesses get destroyed, and it strikes a blow at the heart of fundamental American principles like economic liberty. Right? These are things that matter in a free and open society like the one that we fought so hard to create here in this country. And that we fought so hard to sustain. And when we allow bad policy to go through, not only does it hurt the industry, I think it hurts the country, because it sets a precedent now. What's the next thing that they're going to try to monopolize? What's the next thing that they're going to get away with that's just completely un-American? And so I hope that answers the question.
100%. No, I mean, we saw the same thing in Colorado, and unfortunately, for people that don't know, Nick won a lawsuit, and it's in appeals now until.
Yeah, they went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said they didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, so it's going through the appeals process now. But luckily, we haven't let the wheels of justice turn slowly. It's a good thing for people who are trying to keep our businesses going. So yeah, it's in the appeals process. They'll probably schedule a hearing for oral arguments sometime in 2025, and our trial is February 2025.
Nick, I know your particular story and the loss of your stores and employees, but in the state of Maryland, if you had to describe how many stores you think either laid people off or closed, how many small wholesale brands, in just the 3 months that bill existed as law, how bad do you think it impacted the Maryland hemp industry?
Oh my, it was detrimental. One of the largest wholesale, and the craziest thing is those of us who stood up to them, that were the ones that were present in all the bill hearings, that were showing up and making noise and trying our best to push back on them, were the immediate targets of enforcement. So as soon as enforcement started, they came right to us. We were the first ones. My buddy Dan, you saw him in the documentary, the guy with the glasses. He had the largest and most popular, well-known wholesale distribution company in the state of Maryland. He went out of business 60 days ago. Because of the hit that he took, because they came to his business just like they came to mine, and most of the smoke shops, a lot of them, luckily the enforcement arm wasn't big enough to get to the 11,000 points of retail that we have in the state of Maryland, but the ones that they came to, a lot of them closed, a lot of them tried to pivot. I myself tried to pivot. I went from selling predominantly hemp products, like 100% hemp products, to trying to sell vapes and nicotine and kratom, and I failed miserably because I wasn't known for that. And so I've seen that across the board. To answer your question, JD, it was detrimental. You're talking about 4,200 jobs. Again, those are real people, man. And so it's highly frustrating, extraordinarily depressing. But then we got the injunction, and it's all back. It's going great.
We won story.
It's all back. We're winning again.
And the one thing I would add with that is first of all, bad policy sucks, but good people can do bad policy. And it's frankly because they're not educated on the issues. And so how do you prevent that from happening? From a state legislator's perspective, I will tell you, I represent about 93,000 people in Eastern North Carolina. That's what a House district is. They are my boss. Whether they're Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, vote, not vote, if they're 100 years old or 2 years old, I represent every one of those individuals in that district. I want to hear from them. Your legislator wants to hear from you. Every single one of you in this room has a state legislature. You do. Do you know them? Do you know them well enough to pick up the phone and call them? Do you know them by their first name? You should. And start doing it now, because the last thing you want to do is play defense. You want to play offense. You want, in this industry, everyone in North Carolina, especially in the eastern part of the state, if they have a question on hemp and CBD in our area, they know to call us. They know to come to, I do tours of our facility. We talk to them. We continue to educate them. We have conversations. We'll invite them to dinner. We are engaged as a company, but also as individuals. I have an advantage because I happen to be in the room when all these decisions are made, which is not a bad place to be, by the way. But you need to know your legislator. You need to get involved, whether that's helping on campaigns, whether that's writing a check, whether that's saying hello, whether it's simply putting a sign in your front yard. Get involved in getting to know the people that support this industry. And then I want you to take a step back and look how far this industry has come. I remember when I was in the General Assembly as a freshman member, I walked outside and there was a guy wearing tie-dye with big old cargo shorts on, and he's playing hacky sack. And looked at me and said, "So, brah, where you at on this?" And I was like, his bill's not going anywhere. But that was the mindset. And I look today, and you've got entrepreneurs, you've got chemists, you've got scientists, you've got attorneys, you've got bankers. I mean, the industry is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's really cool to watch an emerging industry launch across this country, and people actually leaving other industries to come in and get involved. There's people in this room that were once in real estate, that were once in banking, that were once in commercial development, that are now in this space. They see the value. We've got farmers, we've got medical professionals, and so it's really building up a great reputation in the industry. And now we have to leverage that to make sure that bad policy doesn't happen in the states where there are no policy, because the policy is coming whether you like it or not. So I would encourage you to get involved, stay involved. I mean, the American Healthy Alternatives Group, we got involved with this group as our company because we wanted to be a part of doing it right. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes a little bit of money. But I tell you, the alternative to locking those doors and telling everybody to go home because your state has bad policy, it's worth it to be proactive.
Yeah, I want to comment on a couple things there, but I'll go into Q&A also. One, as I meet people like John, they do actually care if you call or email them. I mean, I don't know why I'm here, speaking in front of you today, to be real clear, and how I got into policy and rulemaking and all those things, but they are good people, the policymakers. But one, there's bad information, and why I'm here is to educate as many people as I can, to be clear. But why are we here and where are we going is me and Philip did a podcast on Friday with Bob Hogan, and we're like, why are we here? We just sat there and talked about why we're here, the Farm Bill, all these things, and then the next one will be where are we going, which is a lot of stuff that we talked about today. But essentially is we got to educate, we got to be proactive. It does cost money. You do need to protect your state. There might be lawsuits, fights with lawyers, and when you look around and we all have nice businesses, and you're like, well, we do have bankers on our side, we do have politicians, we do have lawyers, we have all these people that have been educated and are now here to defend us. So I want to applaud everyone in the room, one, for being here, and two, for caring enough to be here, and to the people on stage, especially Leader Bell, for listening to his constituents and also making or trying to push policy that's informed and good for the consumer at the end of the day. So with that, I'll open up to questions. Two, right there.
Hi, I'm Stacey Hamilton with Borough Hemp Co. And I noticed that you talked a lot about legislative issues. And definitely we've faced those in both the state of Alabama and the state of Tennessee, which I'm an operator in both. But we're currently facing a lot of issues with state agencies. And the remedy for those are a good bit different than the legislative remedies. How can we address those issues, and how can we come together as a community to fight these state fights in a more organized way?
I've got a funny quote. I was talking to a longtime lobbyist, probably a 20, 30-year veteran, and they said, regulatory compliance is as much about lobbying as it is about actually maintaining compliance. Just like building a relationship with your legislator, you need to build a relationship with the agency that regulates you. And I think as this industry matures, we'll start to see how big tobacco, big pharma, big food, how all of these large industries with the word big in front of them operate inside of agencies. I think, just as much as we're going to lobby the legislature, once the policy passes, we're going to need attorneys and strategists to go through the rulemaking process. Once the rules are done, how do you get from rule to reality? How do you make sure your business is operating in compliance? But sometimes there are some compliance issues in those rules that are just unbelievably unbearable. Sometimes those rules get it wrong, and well, then maybe there's a legal avenue like you're experiencing in Alabama. And certainly legal remedies are there, and certainly we will use them if necessary. But the idea is to mature this industry, grow with the legislature, grow with the agencies, so that everyone at the table is understanding of what it really is going to take to produce a safe product for consumers that is also not cost prohibitive. One of the things that I think about a lot, and one of the things I want to avoid, is the reality of what we've seen in the limited licensure schemes in California and Oregon and Colorado and other states is incredibly high-priced cannabis, right? 2, 3, 4, 5 times the price of black market cannabis. And I think realizing that cannabis and marijuana being in a 100-year prohibition, they've gotten really good at distribution channels. They understand logistics and supply chains better than many large companies. So how are we going to scale this industry in the legal way and making sure that all of our products are compliant and well tested? And that's going to take a ton of relationship building with agencies that have never dealt with us before. So I think Philip and I, we've worked with many agencies, but I would love to hear more from him on this.
I think you just touched on it, right? And I was having a conversation about this very thing maybe about an hour or two ago. Relationships, right? Relationship building with relevant state agencies. Invite them in. Be
Right.
Please.
The Department of Agriculture is our regulatory body. It was the Department of Health that came into our facility, and now the ABC board has gone into another small hemp company manufacturer in Birmingham. So these are state agencies that were not in our purview. I knew all of the Department of Agriculture. I know my legislators, but it's really hard to see those attacks coming.
So you operate in 2 very conservative states, and as a Republican, we hate bureaucracy. We hate government intervention, and we hate big government. And what you've got is big government. In the state of North Carolina back in 2010, we started a committee called the Regulatory Reform Committee. We have a regulatory reform bill that comes to the House. So if you know your state legislator, this is something that they're going to be interested in, on how to get rid of ridiculous, useless, senseless bureaucracy and roll it back step by step. It is not an easy process. It is not a fast process, but it is a long-term process. But that's one way to attack it. Actually clearly communicating. I'll just give you an example. It has nothing to do with the hemp industry, but we had a law in North Carolina that said if you owned a bed and breakfast, you couldn't serve lunch or dinner. I'll tell you how that happened. Somebody got mad because they had a bed and breakfast, and then somebody opened up a restaurant. The restaurant knew somebody, and they shut them down. I mean, that's wow. You realize that in Maryland? But that law was. So those are the things that these elected officials look at. I'll tell you another secret. Tennessee and Alabama. They like to talk about tax reform. We led the way on tax reform as a state, and we're a model for the rest of the country. A big part of tax reform, and you can lower taxes all you want to, we can talk about fiscal policy, all that, but a big part of tax reform is regulatory reform. You can't have one without the other. So really having a conversation with your legislator about that, and then also reaching out to your legislators are going to these organizations, they're going to ALEC, they're going to NCSL, they're going to RSLC, and so these are the things that are being talked about. And so having that relationship with your legislator, if you have a personal one, pick up the phone and call me. I'll get on the phone with them and I'll have a conversation about just absolutely ridiculous bureaucracy. And I will tell you, if it's anything like North Carolina, if Health and Human Services or ABC interfered in the Department of Agriculture, we would have a complete and total uproar fist fight, and agriculture would win. And so talking with your Commissioner of Agriculture and engaging that person to push back on over regulatory, and what you'll end up finding out is the other agencies really don't know their rules and regulations. They're just doing what they think is right. And it's probably somebody that works for somebody that's trying to justify themselves. That's the way bureaucracy works. So you can shut that down pretty quick.
I have not been successful so far, but thank you very much for the information. I appreciate it.
I'm more than willing to help do my part, and I know the Healthy Alternatives Group will help as well.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Sorry about that. I just volunteered for you to help.
No problem, no problem.
You know what? Certain term.
I think this is really interesting. I just had a conversation about this like a week ago. The word adulterated, right, which is where the health department got you. So if you look at the Merriam-Webster definition of the word adulterated, it is to alter the intended use of a food product, right? You're adulterating it after the fact. That would be taking a bag of Skittles, opening it, pouring the Skittles on the table, and spraying it with Delta-8. That would be adulterating a finished food product. The intended use of these products from start to finish, they are manufactured in a facility to end up a hemp product. That is not adulterating, right? And I think that's a legal argument for a court of law, but we have to really conceptualize and as an industry think about how they can narrowly define something and boil it all down to one word and destroy the lives and livelihoods of so many people. You know, I am so sorry. You told me your story yesterday, and I know we spoke earlier a couple of months ago, but hearing stories like yours and Nick Patrick's and several tens and hundreds of people that I've spoken to over the last several months really hurts. And Nick, you touched on this earlier. What does it feel like to bear the weight of the world on your shoulders? It is horrible. It's rough. The three of us and several of our other leaders at the national level and all across the country, we bear an incredible weight. And I'm sorry that you individually are experiencing that, and I want to help you fight it. So we're going to do whatever we can.
Do you have this gentleman?
Hi. First, I just want to thank you guys for what you do. It's very important. I got kind of a personal question just for Nick, since you went through it. My state's on a similar path. Do they give you time to sell your product, or is it just done?
What state?
Which state?
Missouri,
Missouri.
they're talking about it. It's not.
So, man.
I have updates in Missouri.
Me and you can go back this morning. Yeah.
So
He's not lying, he was.
So to answer your question though, in Maryland, they did not.
It depends. So it depends. The answer is it depends.
It's state by state, I would imagine. In Maryland, we asked, that was our last ask. We had 3 asks. First one was our regulatory bill. They said no. But by the way, in Maryland, it's a unique situation. I think it's worth saying. This is a much more difficult battle when you get into recreational cannabis states. And that's what happened in Maryland. It was the same bill that legalized cannabis recreational use that destroyed the hemp industry. So they said, so our last ask, first was our regulatory bill, then came asking them to create an additional licensing category for hemp. They said no to that. The third thing we asked for was a 12-month sunset period. They said no. 6-month sunset period. They said no, you got 90 days. But that was Maryland. So you'll be better in Missouri. These guys are working hard there.
We got 0 days.
Really. And honestly, that's truly a state-by-state, case-by-case basis. I wish there, much like the rest of this industry, I wish there was like a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. That's going to be, dictated more clearly by, what the implementing law says, whether or not there's any runway. I'll use an example. Florida, for example, just passed a law and it's on its way to the governor's desk for signature. That law doesn't go into effect until October 1st. So even if the governor were to sign that into law, there would be, some attenuating runway for people to, sell those products that may be deemed non-compliant after that law goes into effect. So again, the devil's in the details on these types of things. Certainly, I, having left the St. Louis airport this morning, we're on the ground in Missouri. We're doing everything we can to help fight that fight. But be more than happy to follow up with you to, kind of talk through some things and see if you have any ideas about how we can be more effective when we're fighting that.
And my understanding is that you might be okay at this session. but we can talk about that after too. So,
Okay.
actually, our lobbyists in Missouri called me while we're up here. So,
All right.
we'll do last question, but keep in mind we're about to go into another Q&A session essentially. So, if you have questions, we'll have another panel for you to ask them to.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. So JD and I were talking about this morning. In Washington State, they won't even allow me to sell like a CBD honey, even if it's made from isolate, no THC at all, which is very ironic because we live in a legal state. But it's actually only one particular county, the county that I live, that's harassing me. Every other county is cool with it. So I'm wondering, less writing a bill or less suing them, is there any way that I can say, hey, you're saying this is a food product, but realistically, I tell you, the regulatory body, what my product is. I mean, you know, I make a CBD honey, obviously, but I'm just very curious, like, how can I, you know, tell them, like, hey, this is a dietary supplement not within your purview? You know, is there any way that I can have that conversation or anything I can do to stick up for myself in that manner?
I appreciate everybody looking at me on that one. You know, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the devil's in the details on that, because you mentioned a few what I would call buzzwords, right? So dietary supplement, right? What is the definition of dietary supplement under state law? What is the definition? I think JD mentioned it earlier, of adulterated under state law. If this is a decision that's being made by an agency, we've certainly seen that happen in other states across the country. Texas comes to mind. You can't necessarily reclassify a substance just by saying so. There's a few processes that you have to go through in order to do that, i.e. Texas and Delta 8 and Hometown Hero and all that fun stuff. So I think that I would be more than happy to talk to you about that, but I think the way to fight that effectively is to really examine, what your product truly is. Be able to explain it, from soup to nuts, all the way through the process as to how you go from, plant to honey, essentially, or infused honey, let's call it, and then, find the avenues, with how the state defines infused cannabis products, infused hemp products, and find, kind of that niche where you're one but not the other. And seemingly it seems as if, again, and I hate this for you, there's a patchwork of enforcement priorities that you seemingly are surrounded by. But I think that maybe there would be a useful conversation between the sheriff in County X and the health, the sheriff in County Y, or the health agency, or whoever is overseeing it, that says you're fine in one place and not the other. I think that sometimes agency heads, really welcome the input of other agency heads. So there could be a useful opportunity for education there that might help address that problem, rather than going through traditional legal avenues or legislative avenues.
It's ironically made in Texas in a registered facility, which adds an extra layer of tiny bit of protection. But I know that they say you can't make it, but it's just a policy specifically that they're trying to enforce and not a statute. So that's the unfortunate battle that I'm facing in Washington State right now.
More to think about. I would have to, I hate saying this, but I would have to read. I'm a reader.
I can smell the steam coming out of his ears, coming from all the gears turning in his head. He's one of our best thinkers, so yeah.
Now, I'll provide you with an option B. Just come to North Carolina. We don't do stuff. We'll gladly let things put up and on.
Much more friendly to the rest.
All right,
Thank you.
that is our policy panel.